sure many of you are aware, that might as well be 1,000 years when it comes to the changing landscape of the internet. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Disneyland. Most people who visit Disneyland in California are there for the rides, the shows, and the fireworks. Very few of the millions of visitors are aware of the Disneyland Time Capsule. In 1995, cast members of the park built a time capsule to commemorate the park's 40th anniversary. The plaque reads, "A time capsule containing Disneyland memories, messages, and milestones lies beneath this spot." The Disneyland Time Capsule is dedicated to the children of the 21st century who may unlock its contents on the 80th anniversary of Disneyland, July 17th, 2035. The time capsule is buried in the center court of Main Street. It contains photos, newspapers, an Indiana Jones decoder card, whatever that is, and loads of other Disneyland memorabilia. Disney California Adventure also did the same thing in 2012, leaving a time capsule there to be opened in 2037. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the Immortality Drive. This one is just too cool. I love this one. The Immortality Drive is a large memory device that was taken to the International Space Station on October 12, 2008. It contains the digitalized DNA sequence of a select group of humans. These include Stephen Hawking, Stephen Colbert, Joe Garcia, Richard Garriott, Tracy and Laura Hickman, as well as Matt Morgan and Lance Armstrong. So why are the DNA sequences of all these random famous people there? Well, the purpose is to preserve human DNA in this time capsule in Earth's orbit in case some global cataclysm happens down here. That's right, if there was some sort of nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse that just wipes out most of humanity, scientists could theoretically use this DNA time capsule to help restart the population. Or maybe it's not even meant for the scientists, but for aliens that finally get here in 1 million years and all they find is the Immortality Drive, and maybe they just make new humans from it. I think I just wrote a sci-fi movie. Coming in at number 8 now, we have the General Dynamic Astronautics Time Capsule. This time capsule consists of a booklet simply titled 2063 AD. It was sealed in July 1963 and contains predictions by scientists, politicians, astronauts, and military commanders about the state of space exploration in the year 2063. The introduction to the booklet reads as follows. This archive records the predictions sealed in a time capsule during ceremonies commemorating the 5th anniversary of the dedication of the General Dynamics Astronautics Facility. The time capsule is located on the west ramp entrance of the General Dynamics Astronautics Facility at 5001 Kearney Villa Road, San Diego, California. The capsule is to be opened on July 13, 2063. Now guys, I found this one quite interesting because we're already over the halfway point now to 2063. There's only 44 years left out of the 100. Maybe I don't know enough about space travel at the moment, but honestly, humanity doesn't seem to have done too much in terms of at least manned missions since the 1960s. Hopefully someone who knows a lot more than me can tell me I'm very wrong in the comment section below. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Mlk Time Capsule. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech at the Western Plaza in Washington, D.C. 25 years later, in 1988, Western Plaza was renamed Freedom Plaza in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. A time capsule was also buried there to commemorate the occasion. It contains an assortment of MLK's personal items, such as his Bible, a robe he wore to preach in, and even some audio recordings of some of his speeches. The time capsule is set to be opened in 2088, exactly 100 years after it was first laid down. Next on number 6 now, we have FDR's time capsule. In 1940, former U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt buried a time capsule. It was buried at the University of Pennsylvania, and it's massive. It weighs over 450 pounds. That's pretty heavy for a time capsule. There must be some serious load in there, but the interesting thing is, nobody knows what's inside it. That's pretty strange. You'd think that a massive time capsule buried by an actual US president at the university would be well documented, but it's not really. The only thing we know, other than its weight, is when it can be opened. 2040, exactly 100 years after FDR laid it down. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited to know what's inside this. We just have to wait though. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Nickelodeon. Disney are the only kids company that have got in on the time capsule game. In 1992, a time capsule was buried at Nickelodeon Studios. It was later moved to a different studio in 2005, and then again in 2016. It now lies at the Nickelodeon Animation Studio and is set to be opened in 2042, 50 years after it was first sealed. So, what's inside? Well, Nickelodeon got together with the Kids World Council, yes, that's a real thing, and they decided what was the most important thing for kids at that time. These included movies such as Back to the Future and Home Alone on VHS, of course, MC Hammer and Michael Jackson CDs, and Nintendo Game Boy, rollerblades, and some Reebok Pump sneakers. They also put pencils, a skateboard, a baseball, and even a Twinkie in there. This is actually the second time capsule I've talked about recently where they put a Twinkie inside. What is all that about? I've heard the Twinkies do last for years if they are sealed in their packets. Is that why? Are people burying Twinkies and just sort of storing them for future generations to try? Will they like them? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. Maybe Twinkies will actually still be sold then, now I think about it. Awkward. Moving on now to the number 4 spot, we have Perth Observatory. This building was constructed in 1896 in order to help keep time for the whole of Western Australia. When the foundation was laid, the ceremony was attended by Sir John Forrest and a number of other notable dignitaries. They constructed a time capsule out of a lead box and placed it directly beneath the foundation stone. According to the local press, it contained Rontgen raised tubes, a description of the process together with specimen photographs. These were all donated by X-ray pioneer William John Hancock. This time capsule is quite special because it's not only the first known time capsule buried in that area, but in the whole of Australia in general. At the time of recording this video, this time capsule has been underground for over 122 years and counting. There are currently no plans to open the time capsule unless the building is destroyed for some reason. The government announced in 2013 that all research programs would be cut at the observatory, but the building itself would remain open for tours. That means that for the time being, the oldest time capsule in Australia remains safely in place, with no plans to open it in the near future. Next up at the number 3 spot now, we have the largest axe. In 1991, a monument called the World's Largest Axe was built in New Brunswick to celebrate the legacy of Canadian lumberjacks. It's an impressive sight to see. It may very well be the largest axe in the world, but not everyone knows there is actually a time capsule hidden in the head of the axe. The axe is 23 feet long and made of a solid 55 tons of steel. The handle goes up 50 feet into the air, and the stump that the axe is buried into is made of concrete and is 33 feet in diameter. Mind-blowing dimensions there. The time capsule is buried inside the head of this huge structure, and it looks like it will remain this way unless someone attempts to destroy it. Obviously that would be horrible, and good luck trying to destroy the world's biggest axe anyway. One day in the distant future, it may be discovered though, as long as nobody forgets where it is. Otherwise, I doubt that people would just go randomly breaking open the largest axe in the world. Did I mention it was the largest axe in the world? Moving on to number 2 spot now, we have the Bacardi capsule. A lot of the time capsules that I've talked about in these videos are buried by governments or schools, that sort of thing. This is definitely the first one I've talked about that was buried by a rum company, or at least an alcohol company, specifically Bacardi. It was buried in the Bacardi headquarters in Bermuda to celebrate 150 years since Bacardi was founded. It was intended to be a sort of living snapshot of the company in 2012 and contained messages from members of lots of different levels of the company. The messages were addressed to Bacardi employees of 2062. That year will mark the 200th anniversary of the company being founded, and the time capsule will then be opened up. The time capsule also contains photographs of nearly 500 Bacardi employees representing 8 generations. There was also a commemorative medal honoring Bacardi rum as the world's most awarded spirit. Then there was a letter written in an ancient style of Chinese characters from their Chinese-based employees, a letter from their German employees, and a decorated African gourd. These are just some of the items from all over the world that are in there. The time capsule will be opened in a further 43 years, and not a moment sooner. And finally, at the number 1 spot now, we have Tesla. The Arch Mission Foundation is an organization with a goal to create deposits of human knowledge around the solar system. They believe that the more spread out our knowledge is, the more likely it is to survive any sort of disaster, so that it can be preserved for future generations.
Moving on at number 9, we have the mysterious time capsule at the Washington Monument. Now, during construction of the Washington Monument, workers discovered a mysterious time capsule. They said that this time capsule was over 100 years old. The capsule was found behind a bronze plaque that had September 12, 1915 engraved on it. People believe that that was roughly the time that the capsule was placed there. Now, no one knows destroyed. Now, I know I technically cheated with this one because they opened it, but this story was too interesting to not include. No matter who you are, what your passion is, and where you want to take it, we have a place for you at the University of Tasmania.
I'm Harvey, the HRV, the latest frontier in masterful engineering where every inch has been crafted with us.
They still don't know who put it there. In the capsule, there was a copy of George Washington's second inaugural address, a glass bottle with his portrait, and some coins. So, did somebody put it there on behalf of George Washington, or what? Mystery remains. At number 8, we have the refrigerator capsule. Now, in 1939, Westington House filled the capsule with hundreds of items. Some items included alarm clocks, hats, and alphabet blocks. Now, a man named Wayne Donaldson was inspired by that, and in the 60s decided to fill a refrigerator and bury it on a hill. A bunch of other individuals followed in his lead and also did this. Apparently, using a fridge worked really well because it kept bugs out and preserved the items. Now, Wayne decided to put items such as a lava lamp, photos, and hit records in the fridge. All of these individuals plan to dig up their fridge when they are 80. But seriously, hold on one second. Fridges are expensive and they would be a hassle to bury. So you won't catch me doing that. Now, there is a conspiracy that some other people have buried some fridges of their own. But these fridges won't contain lava lamps. Instead, they believe that it may contain dead bodies. In our 7th spot, we have the photograph time capsule. Now, this next story was posted by a Reddit user. Although I'm not sure of its validity, it was too good to not include in this video. So, this user said that 20 years ago, him and his 4 childhood friends made and buried time capsules. Now, they almost forgot about their time capsules, but eventually they remembered and dug them up when they were around 30. But when they dug it up, the user found something more terrifying. Now, in his capsule, he originally placed 2 medals, a $5 bill, and a Charmander Pokemon card. However, all that he found in his time capsules were photos. Now, he really should not have opened this capsule. Each photo was of him at a different stage of his life, and it was labeled. The first photo was of him at his father's funeral. The caption wrote, "Soon you'll wish you could join your father." Another photo was at his graduation. The person that took this photo is said to be Karma. Now, this is quite scary because he doesn't know who had been taking these photos of him and how it got inside the time capsule. Now, this story may be fake, but people believe that it was a user from a parallel universe contacting himself. One thing for sure is that this Reddit user wishes that he listened to his instinct that told him to not open the capsule. Coming in at number 6, we have the
How would you know
time capsule.
That was
Now,
fake.
this time
Were you
capsule
there?
is
Were
created by
you at the
Panasonic and
spot?
the
Tell me what time, what
They wanted
day?
to create 2 time
No,
capsules
you
that
don't
preserve
know.
life and heritage. Now, the lower time capsule is going to remain
You done
buried
my
for another
top.
5,000 more years. The upper
Get
capsule was
what you
opened in
done my
2000
top.
and another would be
You
opened
wasn't
every
there,
100
you wasn't
years.
at the
Now, each
spot.
capsule is said to contain
You don't know what day, what
2,098
time,
objects. A lot of the objects in the
what
capsule
year.
are still unknown. However, some have reported items such as false teeth, handcuffs, a glass eye, and insects and resin.
You don't
Seriously,
even
what a
know if
random
it's
mixture
real
of things. But what are the other items in the capsules? Well, I don't think we'll be alive to get the answer to that
Done
question.
my
But hey, if
shit.
you're watching this video in the year 6000, then comment down below. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the largest axe in
What's
the
next?
world. Now, let's make our way
Scientists
to
are
Mlk
dumb.
Time, Canada. In New Brunswick, a giant axe monument was constructed. This was to commemorate the importance of the lumber and forestry business.
So no
Honestly,
bun.
this is one of the most Canadian things, I swear. Now, this axe is huge. It is made out of 55 tons of
Yeah,
steel.
what do you wish to
We're
that?
it's got a bit of walk. We have humor of Donald Duck, you know.
Really wishing to that too.
No, only a handful of people know where it's hidden.
To the rich and famous, the world's most celebrated cities or places where luxury reigns supreme. However, these bustling metropolises weren't always this way. Go back just a few decades, and you barely recognize them. So, from the most celebrated cities or places where wealth and luxury reign supreme. However, these bustling metropolises
There's no
weren't
bun.
always this way. Go back just a few decades, and you barely recognize them. So, from the Big Apple all the way to the Big Smoke, let's take a tour of some of the world's most shocking city transformations. was just a humble fishing port. So what the heck happened? Well, Kuwait's head of state, the Emir, saw big potential to utilize the port as a trading hub. So in 1959, he pumped millions of dollars into it to expand it, enabling it to accommodate larger ships. Then, just a few years after the port's renovation, Dubai made a miraculous discovery: oil. And oil means money. Before long, the once sleepy fishing port was making tons of cash exporting the liquid gold to countries around the world. By the 80s, it had successfully reinvented itself as a popular tourist destination, and then the money really started coming in. Over the following years, the city was renovated, market stalls were swapped out with luxury shopping malls, and bit by bit, the arid desert was covered with architecture. This was the famous Marina in the year 2000. Fast forward just 20 years, and this is it now. Whoa, and it gets crazier. Back in 2001, the Dubai government started quarrying vast quantities of rock to create massive man-made islands on the city's coast. The most successful of these now has a population of over 10,000 people living there and plays host to a whole swath of hotels, resorts, and housing. So yeah, the city's come a long way since the 50s. Nothing quite says success like creating your own island. Sin City. When you think of Las Vegas, you think of gambling, partying, and world-class entertainment. But in the middle of the 19th century, the now sprawling metropolis was just a tiny Mormon settlement. So how on earth did a Mormon settlement become a party-goer's paradise? Well, it all started back in 1910, when the U.S. state of Nevada banned gambling. By then, the Mormons had all left, and Las Vegas had developed a taste for gambling. So, unsurprisingly, people didn't stop when it was outlawed. They just set up bootleg casinos and gambled illegally instead. Las Vegas quickly became a breeding ground for illegal activities. Seeing this, mobsters moved into the growing city, and by the time gambling became legalized again in 1931, the place had become a crime hotspot. The most notorious mobsters like Bugsy Siegel and Mayor Linsky even opened up a string of hotels there that still stand today, like the iconic Flamingo set up by Siegel in 1946. Unfortunately for Siegel, he was murdered a year later. But that's kind of the risk of the job. Other mobsters continued to develop the city, though, and from the 40s to the 60s, many iconic hotels and casinos were built from racketeering and drug money. Eventually, they were bought up by legitimate owners, and Las Vegas's reputation as the entertainment capital of the world was steadily established. Today, 40 million tourists flock there every year, and every one of them has a bunch of crooks to thank for transforming a patch of uninspiring desert into the now iconic Las Vegas Strip. Damn. If you don't fancy flying to Vegas for your entertainment, though, just hit those like and subscribe buttons instead. That way, you'll get all of my new amazing content delivered straight to the comfort of your own home. Anyway, where were we? Comeback Queen. It's safe to say that times have been tough on Japan's largest city, Tokyo. And I mean seriously tough. Imagine a natural disaster destroys your home, so you rebuild it, only for it to be bombed into oblivion a few years later. Well, if you were a resident of Tokyo back in the 1920s, you wouldn't have to imagine. That's because in 1923, a huge earthquake hit the city, leveling it entirely and leaving a tragic 140,000 bodies in its wake. Rebuilding efforts began, but just 22 years later, the city was brutally destroyed again. This time by a U.S. firebombing attack during World War II. So, after all this, how did the city possibly become the gleaming high-tech megalopolis that it is today? Well, the U.S. was worried that obliterating several of Japan's cities had made the struggling nation consider adopting communism. As the antithesis of the American way of life, this would have made Japan a threat, which couldn't be allowed to happen. So, to get it back on its feet again and avoid creating a new communist enemy, the U.S. sent Japan a huge sum of money, like $2.2 billion huge. That's the equivalent of a colossal $31.5 billion today. With this sudden influx before, in Tokyo alone, 10,000 office and residential buildings were built, 4 5-star hotels erected, and a swanky new railway still functions today. How's that for a comeback? Gangnam Style. You've probably heard of K-pop megastar Psy's Gangnam Style. Do you know what the song's actually about? Well, unless you're fluent in Korean, probably not. It's poking fun at Seoul's notoriously ostentatious Gangnam district. But in 1900, this wealthy hotspot was more farmland than megacity. Seoul steadily developed throughout the 20th century, but it wasn't until 1961 when the really dramatic changes happened. That year, Park Chung-hee became president of South Korea and decided to embark on a strategy of rapid industrialization. To achieve this, he instigated policies to support domestic production and reduce reliance on foreign imports. By giving financial support to South Korean family-run businesses, called chaebols, he helped guarantee their success and subsequently the success of the economy. South Korea stopped relying on imports and started turning over huge profits from their own products. And the chaebols became responsible for a colossal 2/3 of all of South Korea's exports. You probably own at least one of their products, unless you don't recognize any of these. With key sources of income secured, South Korea rapidly modernized, but in the rush to build up as fast as possible, corners were cut, with devastating consequences. Not only did the Songsu Bridge collapse in 1994, but the Sampoong department store crumbled to the ground in 1995, leaving hundreds of casualties in its wake. Despite these tragedies, however, South Korea's famously fast approach has had some serious results. In just 50 years, Seoul has completely transformed. Today, the city is one of the hippest cultural capitals in the world, full of innovative architecture and luxury shopping destinations. I guess you could say it's the life and soul of the party. Divine Desert. Life in the United Arab Emirates' sprawling city of Abu Dhabi moves in the fast lane. For real, it's home to Ferrari World, which houses the world's fastest roller coaster. But like Dubai, Abu Dhabi was once, you guessed it, one big old desert. The man responsible for the dramatic change was Sheikh Zayed, who was leader of the Emirates. He went on a mission in 1970 to turn the drab desert into the lush green space it is now. But how do you turn one of the driest places in the world into a vibrant green city? Well, first you plant a butt ton of palm trees.
Yeah,
and by butt ton, I'm talking 40 million. By leveling sand dunes, putting a layer of clay over the top of them, and surrounding them with trees, the Sheikh created farmable land that was protected from the wind. Then he gave these farms to citizens and taught them how to cultivate the land. As the dry desert was steadily replaced by lush greenery, Abu Dhabi became more and more attractive to visit. Over time, dazzling tourist attractions emerged across the city, funded by the UAE's main moneymaker, oil exportation. Now there are super modern art galleries, impressive mosques, and even Formula One racing tracks. What an outstanding revamp! The Big Smoke. The capital city of England is renowned for a skyline so distinctive that it's recognizable from its silhouette alone. But this historical city once looked very different. During the Blitz of World War II, London was hit with over 12,000 tons of bombs, seriously damaging or outright destroying over 1 million buildings. Afterwards, it was almost unrecognizable.
Stop right there. I know you're about to watch a video, but stop that because I have a special offer that has the potential to change your life, so keep watching.
It was almost unrecognizable, and understandably there was a major housing crisis. So in the years after the war, the government churned out a slew of cheap concrete high-rises. Stylish they were not, but they were cost and space effective. Today these high-rises are notoriously unattractive. But there's one exception to that rule, the Barbican Center. First built on bombed land, the Performing Arts Center is now the largest of its kind in Europe, and it's one of the most desirable places to live in London, too, complete with over 2,000 apartments, an art gallery, and its very own conservatory. Indeed, this city's growth hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, with its skyline continuing to dramatically expand in the last 20 years. These days, London is one of the richest cities in the world, and its affluence has led to some truly iconic buildings, like the Shard, the Gherkin, and the Cheese Grater. But man, what's up with the names? No under its own weight. Over 10.5 million people live there now, but back in 1960, there were less than a quarter of that. So why did the population snowball so rapidly? Well, due to fewer job opportunities in the countryside, Indonesians started migrating to urban areas in the hope of a better life. To accommodate them, Jakarta needed to rapidly urbanize, so large buildings were thrown up in any available space. The National Monument of Indonesia was also built around the time of this population boom in 1961. Back then, the area looked about as barren as it gets. Today, however, the monument sits in the center of a popular square, and you can get a crystal clear view of the surrounding urban jungle from the platform at the top. This is all well and good, but I know what you're thinking. Shut up and tell me more about the sinking part. Essentially, Jakarta is built on soft soil, held up by the pressure of groundwater below. This means that when the many residents of Jakarta use wells to extract this groundwater, it leaves empty space underneath, causing the land to literally sink. An issue which is only worsened by the thousands of heavy buildings resting on top. Understandably, the Indonesian government are treating this problem pretty damn seriously. To relieve pressure on the overcrowded urban center, they're building an entirely new $30 billion capital city. It better be fast, though. Jakarta is currently sinking at the shocking rate of up to 6 inches a year. In fact, it's estimated that a whole third of the city could be submerged by 2050 if nothing changes. Yikes. It really is sink or swim in this modern world. Rubber rainforest. Take a look at this peaceful 1920s village. Looks like a pretty good place to retire, right? Well, you can throw that idea in the trash. This is that same village now. It's actually Kuala Lumpur, the biggest city in the whole of Malaysia. And its crazy transformation is all thanks to tires. Wait, what? When the U.S. automobile industry went through a boom in the 1920s, there was a sudden huge demand for rubber tires. Rubber trees, however, don't grow in the U.S. Any guesses where they do grow? Yup, Malaysia. Out of nowhere, everybody wanted the country's rubber, and the price of the highly sought-after commodity shot sharply upwards. Kuala Lumpur flourished from the increase in trade. Foreign planters flocked to the town to establish new rubber companies in between 30,000 to 110,000. As the years went by, Kuala Lumpur grew and grew. Now it's complete with almost 2,000 high-rise buildings, which have popped up around traditional landmarks like the Jamek Mosque and the Clock Tower in Old Market Square. The Clock Tower in Old Market Square. The greatest sign of how far the city has come, though, has to be the iconic Petronas Towers. At a dizzying 1,500 feet high, they're the tallest twin towers in the whole world. And no, they're not made of rubber. The vertical city. Over 500 skyscrapers dominate the Hong Kong skyline, landing it the nickname the vertical city. Hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing the Chinese Civil War settled in the region, bringing over valuable skills and cheap labor. Armed with this influx of new workers, Hong Kong was all set for some super rapid industrialization. To meet North America and Europe's growing demand for manufactured goods, the city specialized in things like textiles, shoes, and plastic. Exporting these goods pulled heaps of money in, and as the 20th century progressed, Hong Kong progressed with it. Now it's littered with so many towers you can barely make out the mountains behind, and they're completely obscured when the nightly symphony of lights kicks off, the world's largest light and sound show. With stunning lasers and pyrotechnics lighting up the sky, it's hard to imagine this place was ever a sleepy little town. It's a transformation worthy of a crown, but unfortunately, King Kong is already taken. Sublime sands. Of all the places to become stupendously rich, this barren patch of desert sure doesn't look like one of them. And yet, in just 50 years, it's now almost unrecognizable. The place in question is Doha, and like other cities in the United Arab Emirates, it used to be little more than a small pearl fishing community. The town chugged along, slowly growing, until the sudden discovery of oil in 1939, which opened up a whole host of new money-making possibilities. However, just as Doha began exporting oil, the value of pearls dropped sharply, stunting the city's growth. It wasn't until the 1950s and 60s that the real wealth started coming farms to the ground and building modern settlements in their place. From then on, Doha grew from strength to strength, building a deep water port in the 70s, which opened it up to even more trade and income. And as modern architecture replaced traditional, the city quickly rose in status and importance. In 1997, the government even built a huge learning hub at the edge of Doha called Education City, which at 5 square miles is literally the size of a small city. Damn! Jump to now, and Doha itself is as extravagant as it comes, with miles of futuristic buildings taking over the coastline and its own man-made island. Man, I struggle with finishing Lego sets, let alone entire cities. Built-up beaches. Brazil is well known for its temperate climate,
Susie,
lush
do you
rainforests,
smoke weed?
and beautiful
Show off.
beaches. So
What
it's
about
no
smoke?
surprise that the sprawling
Show off.
beachside city of
Cool.
Fortaleza is a huge
Here's a joint and a
tourist
smoke.
destination. More surprising, however,
Let's have a joint, then a smoke, then we'll fuck. Come, Daddy.
1800, Fortaleza had just 3,000 inhabitants, but when both a port and railroad were installed in the town,
So a joint now.
exponentially throughout the 19th century. Because of its new transport links, Fortaleza became the trading hub of the region, and its biggest export, cotton, conveniently nearby. As its importance to trade grew, Fortaleza grew with it. By 1920, its population had increased dramatically to nearly 79,000 people. Even so, it was still far from what it is today. Naturally, though, the growing population only increased production, spurring the city to expand ever more. And as it did so, it began to attract the attention of tourists drawn to its majestic beaches. They pumped even more money into the city, and by the 1970s, the once peaceful coastline was transformed into a busy urban landscape. Today, Fortaleza is famous for its urban beaches, which sit against a modern backdrop of hotels, resorts, and beach bars. It would be easy to forget it was ever anything else. These built-up beaches give the city a unique selling point, creating the perfect fusion between city break and beach holiday. Talk about the best of both worlds. Shanghai. Shanghai is the richest city in East Asia. As such, it would be easy to assume that it's always been the thriving business powerhouse it is today. But guess what? Yeah, you probably know it's coming by now. But back in 1900, this megacity was a mere fishing village. So what caused Shanghai's big glow up? Well, it's perfectly located for trade, allowing convenient access to ships from China's neighboring countries, whilst also providing the perfect gateway to China itself. Still, this handy location wasn't properly capitalized on until the 90s, when China fully opened itself up to global trade. Recognizing the city's geographic importance, China's leader, Premier Zhu Rongji, poured money and resources into Shanghai, and in doing so made the city one of the most powerful trading locations on Earth. As the money flooded in, rapid urbanization came with it, and Shanghai's skyline transformed completely in a matter of decades. These days, the city looks more like a sci-fi metropolis than a fishing port. That rocket-looking building is the Oriental Pearl Tower, and it was the tallest building in China until 2007, when the Shanghai World Financial Center took the crown. Although neither building is going to take you to space, they certainly look out of this world. Carnival City. Now it's time to take a trip to the world-famous Copacabana Beach. Or at least, I wish it was. We might not actually be there, but we can still marvel at Rio De Janeiro, the Brazilian city where Copacabana resides. Slap bang between the mountain and the sea, Rio's location is so rare that UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site. But rewind back in time and the landscape is barely recognizable without its iconic statue of Christ the Redeemer. Built over 100 years ago, the statue supposedly protects the people beneath it. Unfortunately, however, it hasn't always done its job. Since 1950, Rio's population has risen at an astonishing rate, with over 10 million people settling in the city. Usually this would be great for a city, but the radical influx of people wasn't initially met with sufficient housing or infrastructure. Because of this, many of Rio's inhabitants had to develop their own self-built neighborhoods, called favelas. These neighborhoods were built on steep forest slopes, without sanitation or electricity. So yeah, they were smelly, dirty, and generally less than ideal places to live. Fortunately, Rio gained a much-needed cash injection when oil and gas were discovered off the coast in 2006. Since then, the government has been working to upgrade its housing situation, though sadly favelas still remain. Despite ongoing disparity between the rich and poor, however, spectacular coastal landscape. And these beautiful views make it the perfect spot for the Rio Carnival, a vibrant celebration which attracts 2 million attendees each day that it runs. Jeez, that's almost as big as my last birthday party. Concrete jungle. New York City. Or as it's widely known, the city that never sleeps. True, the most populated city in the U.S. doesn't sleep anymore, but it definitely used to. In fact, this vast concrete jungle of nearly 9 million people had just 5,000 inhabitants at the turn of the years. The Southeast Asian island of Singapore is so small, you can drive across the entire thing in just an hour. Despite its tiny size, however, it has one of the highest average incomes in the world. Not that it was always this way. In the mid-20th century, the island was one of the poorest places on the planet. That's one massive turnaround then, and it's all thanks to the city's public housing strategy. You see, by the time the 1960s rolled around, Singapore had had a housing crisis for decades. There were too many people for too few houses, so many of them lived in abject squalor. But in 1966, the Government Housing Board decided enough was enough and made a massive effort to change this. Affordable housing was built, and schemes were set up to help the poor save up for a proper place to live. Because of this, the quality of life for hundreds of thousands of people dramatically improved. And with its citizens happier and better off, the government began building factories on previously unused swampland. This created a ton of jobs and massively boosted the economy, paving the way for Singapore to become the economic powerhouse it is today. Now, the Marina Bay Sands Resort is one of the city's most famous attractions, along with the enchanting 250-acre gardens by the bay. But did you know the very ground they're built on didn't used to be there? Yep, naturally Singapore is hilly, which isn't conducive for building on. So in the 1970s, the government had a crazy idea. They cut out ground from nearby hills and brought it over to the coast on a huge 16-mile-long conveyor belt system. No, I'm not lying. The relocated ground was planted off the coastline, and over time it was built upon, growing alongside the main city. Today, the man-made island is incredibly popular, and Singapore is a tourist hotspot. But I think we can all agree, after its radical transformation, it should be called Singapore-rich. Alright, that's just about all we've got time for today.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Woody, and today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 signs of parallel universes throughout history. Also, I'm going to try and explain the sciencey parts of this for you guys as best as I can, but I'm not a scientist, so give me a break if I mess something up here. Number 10, the London Hammer. Many times in history, people have found objects that they think could be evidence of a parallel universe.
The only reason why I'm watching this channel is because there's nothing much on YouTube right now. There's no new videos I like on YouTube. So watch these fucking cunts here.
And in 1936, a hammer was found in London, Texas. While on a walk, a couple found a hammer that looked like ones that had been used in the late 1800s. So, cool, they found an old hammer. Well, there's actually much more to it. The hammer had not rusted at all, and still hasn't since it's been found. And it was also found encased in rock that dated back to the Cretaceous period. For those of you who don't know, that's around 100 million years ago. This is obviously weird because most people agree that humans only started popping up around 200,000 years ago. So how could this hammer have come to exist? Some people believe that it's the remnant of a parallel universe where humans developed long before they did on our Earth, or that it had potentially traveled back in time. If you live in Texas and want to check out this infamous hammer for yourself, you can find it at Carl Bowe's Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. Number 9, black holes. The existence of black holes is one of the greatest yet unexplained wonders of our universe. The first picture of a black hole only having been taken back in 2019. So how are they evidence of parallel universes? Well, let's get into some science here. Black holes are so hard to study because everything we send out there to try and get information is never seen again. People assuming that it's destroyed upon entering the hole. But Stephen Hawking said that whatever enters a black hole does come out, but it comes out in another universe. Because of the law of conservation of mass, even if something is destroyed, evidence of its presence would still be able to be seen. They would be visible in hair-like images that trace its path into the black hole. But Stephen Hawking